This is your World War III update, and I got some bad news. This is not going to be a popular opinion, but that's okay. I owe it to you to tell you the truth, even if it means you don't like what I have to say. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are lying to their populations about the severity of this war and which direction it's going in. You see, day after day, the attacks get bigger and more consequential, and this is totally misaligned with the diplomatic facade that we are witnessing. And I'm going to explain to you why. Both nations' leaders, or any leader in a war for that matter, has a vested interest in allaying the fears of their population by downplaying the risks, especially when we're talking about a peer nuclear competitor. The last thing you want is people concerned about the prospect of nuclear escalation and mucking with your logistics and protesting in the streets against the war. Because that, of course, could impact your ability to finance a war in the military-industrial complex, to administrate it, to mobilize for said war, and continuity of government. So the last thing you want is a population who is pissed off and worried about the prospect of escalation. Now, this is what I call the pacification paradox, okay? Because what happens is, even if your enemy makes an advance against you, you will downplay it because it runs the risk of doing the aforementioned, panicking your population. So you're in a situation then when the closer you get to day X, the proverbial day when there's some kind of flashpoint of hostilities between the two sides, and this is historically precedented. Before every major war, there's a big peace summit. There's a red carpet that's rolled out. Both leaders meet and shake hands, and then they go to war, because that's the final off-ramp that's been burned. And we've burned that. And most people have no idea. And most pundits, I'm just amazed and astonished at how delusional they are at this point in time to believe what they're seeing. Because everything right now is pointing towards this war is escalating in ways that we never seen under the last POTUS. It's all a continuity of agenda, regardless of who is in the White House. I've stated that on many occasions. Unfortunately, some people suffer from Trump worship syndrome. Some people suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. But if you're suffering from Trump worship syndrome, you'll view an objective outsider like me as Trump derangement. But that's because you're completely blinkered in your point of view. Anyways, you're beyond help, and I really don't give a shit at this point. So I'm speaking to the people who have some sense about them and can see beyond the political bullshit at this point in time. And I can tell you that that's what's happening. That in the run-up to day X, in the run-up to the war actually intensifying, we're going to see more and more dovish language. Because, you know, if they were to call attention to the fact that Ukraine just targeted a nuclear power plant utilizing Western ISR, right? Utilizing, you know, U.S. spy planes that are hovering around the Black Sea, then it would expose this phony baloney diplomatic facade. You see, this is higher level analysis that, you know, most people are just not going to be willing to entertain, because a lot of people, as well-meaning as they are, they don't want to know how bad the situation actually is. So they want, you know, the Mickey Mouse narrative. But I'm not going to give that to you. In fact, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the news as to what's really going on. The truth with a little t, because I'm not talking about the big, you know, universal, omniscient truth. That's another video altogether. U.S. nuclear command plane in Greenland. The U.S. Navy E-6B Mercury, which is designed to maintain communications with nuclear-armed submarines in a conflict, was deployed to Pacific Thule Air Base. You see how it's all coming together? Trump, Greenland, Pacific, Putin, Arctic submarines. A couple days ago, he made some comments about how our Arctic submarines have an advantage. He didn't say what it was, of course, but there's all of this like telegraphing that is happening between Putin and Trump in the Russian media, because the Russian media right now is dead set on placating their population and making them think that they're going to have peace with the United States. And nothing could be furthest from the truth, because they don't want people to freak out and get in the way of the war. They're fine entertaining this, nonsense about Ukraine being the one and not being a proxy of the United States government. They're fine doing that for now because it's diplomatically instrumental for them to do so. But the real deal is that they're putting these B-6 Mercury command and control plane in Greenland just a few days or a few weeks, I guess now, after Trump threatened to forward deploy nuclear submarines. Now, why would you do that if what you were saying was true about peace? You see what I'm saying? So you're going to see the red carpet. Nothing scares me more than seeing Putin walk down a Western red carpet, because that means day X is nigh. It really does. It's the pacification paradox. Both sides are going to lie through their teeth because it's better than having a bunch of screaming people running around getting in the way while they're trying to get the bunkers locked and loaded, to be just blunt about it. Experts are calling the move highly unusual, though the Navy insists that it's routine operations. Okay. This, of course, comes after Trump's ordering 2 nuclear submarines closer to Russia. Putin on Russian submarines, he claimed the following, that subs can dive beneath Arctic ice, vanishing from radar. Our military has an advantage. Now, I don't really understand what they mean by this. Maybe they mean that the Russians have more capabilities in this respect. I know they have nuclear icebreakers in the Arctic, and they're certainly, when it comes to just their abilities in colder climates in the Arctic regions, they likely excel above and beyond the United States, but I'm not a submarine expert. But apparently Putin has been making some statements about this, okay, and talking about how there is a military advantage with their submarines, and it somehow involves the Arctic, which again calls attention back to this whole obsession with Greenland and now putting command and control nuclear planes there to give the launch codes to the United States. And just remember, this decapitation strike is going to come like a lightning bolt when they attempt it. It's going to come out of nowhere. I don't know how they're going to justify it to the population, because they've got everybody brainwashed into believing that what we're seeing right now, even the NAFO crowd is freaking out. Both the Trump worshippers and the Trump deranged. The Trump deranged thinks it's the end of the world because Vladimir Putin came to visit in Alaska. People who are clear-eyed can see what's really going on. People who with Trump worship think it's the best thing that's since sliced bread and he should get a Nobel Peace Prize, when in the shadows, everything is escalating. For example, the U.S. just approved the sale of 3,300 ERAM missiles. These are, I think it's excessive range missiles. It's like a air-launched cruise missile. So these can go up to they can almost reach Moscow. I think it's like 450 kilometers, okay? So this is something that Biden never gave to them, and these things are inexpensive. So what that means is that they're going to mass produce them, and they're going to leverage these. Now, recently, of course, this news was cleverly front-run by the story that, oh yeah, we're not allowing Ukraine to target deep inside Russia, that it was disclosed that in the last 2 months, the Russians the Ukrainians are not allowed, according to U.S. intelligence, they're not being provided with targeting data deep inside Russia. They're just saying that shit. Because the only way Ukraine can control its drones outside of the AI systems that they have that use like topographical identification software in order to identify their targets, they're using Starlink, they're using American guidance systems for that. So the idea that they haven't been using it in the last 2 months, again, it's just more because they know that whatever they say now, Russia will go along with it because they don't want to expose the facade. Pentagon is going to authorize use against Russian territory on a case-by-case basis. Of course, Trump said in 2 weeks, if the situation isn't resolved, then they're going to have to potentially do something else. He didn't specify what. Of course, that is consistent with the original 50-day ultimatum timeline that was laid out almost 50 days ago. Now, Ukraine is warning Belarus against these upcoming very large Zapad 2025 military exercises. These are going to feature Orezhnik hypersonic missiles that are missiles that, of course, can defeat pretty much any defense system, at least the ones that the test one that was fired off last November, right after Trump was elected. And that, of course, is relating to him backing out of the INF Treaty. And a lot of the intermediate nuclear forces stuff is linked. So you have Trump backed out of the INF Treaty. Russia, after Trump gets elected, they launch an intermediate nuclear-capable missile in a demonstration as a show of force. And then, of course, they back out of the INF Treaty. Then 1 week later, the Ukrainians unveil a intermediate, possibly nuclear-capable missile, because we're talking about something that can carry a payload of 2,500 pounds, all right? And they could not have created that themselves. Some people are saying it's derived from an old Soviet model, but I would suspect that they would have to have some sort of plausible deniability to make it look like that, but I'm certain that the internal guidance systems and all of the, more fancy, sophisticated circuitry is likely inspired by the Western people who enabled them to manufacture it, probably in a Western country masquerading as Ukraine on video. So Belarus already hosts tactical nuclear weapons, and they're getting ready to do these big exercises in September, okay? And it doesn't really look like much is changing in terms of diplomatically. Now they're saying that they're not going to negotiate with Zelensky again, so, we're right back to square one. Everybody's just buying time, just like I said. Black Sea tension is ramping up, so we had a P-8A Poseidon flew abnormal anti-sub patrols near Crimea. And we also have an RQ-4B Global Hawk strategic drone returning to the Black Sea after a month of absence. So we have manned and unmanned planes flying very close to Crimea. And who is in control of those planes? You guessed it, the United States. The ones who apparently are rolling out the red carpet to Vladimir Putin. Multiple unmanned boats near Snake Island and Odessa. There's a buildup suggesting that there may be an imminent strike on Crimea once again. Ukraine drones struck a nuclear power plant in Kursk, damaging a transformer and forcing reactor 3 to unload by 50%, although radiation background corresponds to natural levels. There was also witnesses who claim that in the Leningrad region, that at the Leningrad nuclear power plant, there was an overnight drone barrage and explosions were heard across multiple oblasts and the oblast which is home to this nuclear power plant and close to it. This is one of the largest nuclear power plants inside Russia, supplying much of St. Petersburg's grid. So even near misses calculate a pretty extreme escalation risk. All around, we just seen countless targets hit over the weekend, and not just in Russia. You guys seen what happened in, Louisiana? Okay, so within the span of 48 hours, we had an American facility go up in smoke, which I'm not so sure that was an accident. You have one in Iran, 2 in Iran. You have several in Russia and several in Ukraine. So the energy war is on. And surprisingly, I wouldn't be surprised if oil just plummeted, because nothing makes sense anymore. If anything, oil should be in the 80s minimum at this point in time. But plunge protection is on the case, because they know if that price of oil goes up, then inflation goes up correspondingly. They don't want that. Kim Jong-un is ordering a rapid buildup of his nuclear arsenal, citing U.S.-South Korean nuclear drills. And they put loudspeakers back on the border again. They briefly removed them, but the North Koreans have re-put them on the border again. So that's what's going on there. Hundreds of drones overnight striking oil terminals, refineries, strikes across power plants, nuclear power plants, everywhere. It's just total pandemonium on the front lines. President Carney went to Kiev to visit with the Ukrainian leader on the Ukrainian Independence Day. And an interesting thing to point out is that one of these guys wants to take all your guns, and the other guy wants to give you a gun, but there's a catch. You got to go and die in a trench, right? So that's your choice, guys. That's your choice in the future. Living under tyranny, where you can't own a firearm, or you can own a firearm, but you're probably going to go die in the trenches, because your ass is going to get conscripted for war. Yep. According to Sergei Lavrov on Zelensky, Putin is ready to sign with the president of Ukraine, not a clown. So I guess they're waiting for this Zelensky replacement, perhaps. Kremlin insists that Zelensky lacks legitimacy as the president and hints that it will only talk to successors or generals. But the reality is, would that really make a difference, or are they just trying to buy more time? You really think they're going to sign an agreement with Zelensky? You know? Like, what is the big deal with Zelensky? If he's just a puppet, if he's just a clown, then what does it matter? If he's just a court jester, if he's just a messenger of the powers that be, then who cares? Really? They're just trying to buy time, guys. They know full well what's going on. Things are escalating in a nuclear sense in the back channels, and they're doing whatever they can to just move this procession along. Putin is going to be going to China for 4 days next week. That's big. 4 days. Speculation of a potential Putin-Trump-Xi trilateral meeting. I don't know about that. U.S. has stopped sharing Ukrainian intelligence with the Five Eyes as it's seen as a tilt towards potential normalization with Russia. This is just the dumbest. Look, if you believe that, man, I don't know. They're going to say things like this because they want to create this illusion that, you know, Trump and Putin are making amends. It's not happening. A series of blasts from Qom to Tehran highways in Iran. New fire in Kamshahir. Suspected sabotage targeting nuclear-linked sites. And the Ayatollah has once again rejected direct talks with Washington and vows to resist pressure. Now the Iranians have got wise and said that, oh yeah, our nuclear enrichment uranium, it's buried in a bunker, or it's buried in the bottom of a Fordow facility, and we can't access it. They finally got wise to say that so that they can play along with this temporizing game that the United States is using as a justification for backing off the Iran war. So initially, the Iranians were saying, we know where our enriched uranium is, we have access to it. Now they're saying, oh yeah, it's buried in the bottom of Fordow, with the hopes that, you know, the US and Israel don't start their campaign again. There are reports suggesting that Russia may deliver 2,000 Iran drones to Venezuela, also considering Cuba and Nicaragua. This is as Venezuela is surrounded by a flotilla of US warships. That's pretty much all I got for you today. Everything else is kind of secondary and not really necessary. It's Sunday. I planted 10 fruit trees today. Actually, 5 fruit trees, 5 maple trees for maple syrup, some sugar maples. And everything in this greenhouse is just, I mean, we got so much food out of this greenhouse this year, and it just keeps coming, man. Like tomatoes, you guys can see my tomatoes over there. It's a tomato jungle. And it just keeps on. It's growing like weeds. It's like trees over there. So we got all kinds of food. Tomatoes, onions, fruits, just the amount of strawberries, the amount of peppers. It's just a cornucopia. This is the work you got to do beforehand. You got to plant. You got to get the stuff planted in the ground. And mostly the perennials, that's what I'm worried about. So right now in my orchard, over the past year and a half, I've planted about 60 fruit trees, and they're all between 6 to 8 years old. And because I don't want to wait 8 years, I don't think we got 8 years, to be brutally honest. And I got about an equal amount of shrubs, like smaller cherry trees, raspberries, grapes, you know, things like that, blackberries, blueberries, Saskatoon berries, things like that. So no shortage of calories. We have a whole potato setup. We have the land if we wanted to do grains. We could even start making biodiesel. We might have to do a video on that in the future. But yeah, just getting everything set up, just grinding, man, trying to get it done because, you know, time is of the essence. I truly believe that. Otherwise, I'd just be kicking it in a high-rise condo somewhere with a much faster internet connection and all those nice climate controls and skip the dishes and all that good stuff. But, you know, the thing is, guys, I could probably just buy, you know, I mean, I got 10, 20 years worth of food at the warehouse. You know, I don't need to do this, but I'm doing it because I practice what I preach, and I believe that, unfortunately, what's coming, there's not going to be any resupply. And the problem with storing stuff is no matter how much you store, you're going to run out. There's going to be a situation where more people enter into your space than you expected, maybe extended family, and you just can't prepare for it. So you have to have the regenerative systems in place. And honestly, the food is so much better. Like when I made some salsa over the weekend, absolutely delicious stuff, man. Like just, you know, way better than what you can buy in a store. Way better. We got all the ingredients sourced from our garden here. And we got the chickens now that are getting bigger. And so I built them a chicken coop. So we're gonna have the whole kit and caboodle out here, and next year maybe even get into the more ruminant, some cows and sheep and things like that. So anyways, that's that. I will see you tomorrow. Go and check out my video on Canadian Prepper. Give that video some love, man. I'm trying to help you guys get strategically relocated. I've devised a system utilizing AI to help us find the best properties that are suitable for preppers. And I go over all the different things that you should look for, even if you're not in the market for a property, even if you're somebody who's just getting into this prepping stuff and you live in the city and you don't plan on moving out into the country anytime soon. You got to go watch that video, because it's going to educate you on the things that you need in order to, if you ever did want to do that, or just if you ever had to go and scavenge, or if you ever had to, you know, squat and move into a place that was abandoned or something. It'll give you a lot to think about, all right, with respect to how you can acquire a decent piece of off-grid land, because what the realtors are going to tell you is not going to be the same as what a prepper like myself is going to tell you in terms of what's important. A lot of the things that people value on a property, I could care less about. And the things that they don't value are the things that really pique my interest. So go and check out that video, and hopefully it gives you some ideas. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.